Hello, hello. Welcome. Another day drinking with David. It's a beautiful Thursday afternoon in Los Angeles, although they keep telling us the torrential rain is coming. We are being visited today by Robert Forster of Wonderbird Spirits. Pretty unique, true field to bottle gin. A lot of people use that term, field to bottle. Obviously, you know, anything made with an agricultural product, which is everything that we drink, is field to bottle. But this is a little bit different, a little more special. I'm really happy to be selling this at our store, and hopefully Robert is on his way. And how do we join? Robert, hopefully you're watching. In which case, I'll just simply add you here. Maybe we should have Wonderbird. In any case, well, he's not here yet. Let's have a look here. I might do a little shout and see if he's figured out how to do it here. Anyway, this is gin made from rice distillate, grown in Mississippi. It's pretty unique. Hopefully he will be here shortly. Here, I'm gonna have to go for two. There they are. All right, so easy. It's so easy. In any case, it's a pretty interesting product. Wonderbird. Bird, there it is. Oh gosh. Here we go. Robert, I see you'll be here soon. 4 Pillars sets the bar high, no doubt, but there's room for many, many gins. Hello. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Let me just turn this up here. So, Robert, how is Mississippi? How are you?
Man, all's well. All's well. How are you guys?
We're good. We can barely hear you. Is everybody able to hear Robert? Maybe just step a little closer.
I've worked it up a little bit. Hear me now?
I don't know what happened, but
David, how about now?
I hear you great. I think it was on my end. I'm trying to figure out a way to record these with all of the comments, which Instagram for some reason chooses is not the right thing to do. But there's always some weird technical difficulties with that. So whatever. Here we are. Thank you. Let's start this again. We can't have an IG live without some sort of goofball thing happening. So Robert, you know the store because you're formerly of Los Angeles.
Yes.
You've I actually don't know your story very well. I know the story of the gin from what you've told me, but it's a big change to Oxford, Mississippi. I'll tell you what, from Hancock Park or wherever you live. But yeah, tell me about what you're doing in Mississippi there, man.
Here, right? Always changing. All good. I think, yes, I was an entertainment lawyer out there for a long time, and but I'm originally from the South, and I had a couple of very, very small children, and had all the thoughts that normal people do in those circumstances, which is to say, being close to our families and maybe getting back a little closer to our roots might be a nice thing. Moved to Mississippi about 5 years ago. Immediately understood that for a town with 40,000 full-time people, it was amazing on food and bev. It has 3, James Beard award-winning restaurants in this tiny little town. It's also the home of the Mississippi flagship university, right? It's got a literary culture with William Faulkner and a couple of other major writers from the 80s. There's a lot of history here, it's a cultural crossroads. So, I immediately said to one of my old buddies from law school, one of my closest friends, or undergrad, hey, I don't think they've done a distillery project or a brewery project here. I think this could be really cool. And he came and visited me with his family. I also met a younger man in town who had a similar vision and saw similar potential. And, that's it. 3 years ago, we all came together and said, why don't we make a beautiful world-class gin from rural Mississippi and kind of flip the script a little bit. And that's what we've been trying to do. And I think, David, what I've said to you is it was always about excellence. It was always about grain to glass. It was always making something that was of this place and had that truly like local feel and handmade feel from the very beginning. That's how we got our start. We didn't build this place with a GC or an architecture firm or an engineering firm. We designed it with our own hands and built it with our own hands. And this has always been a labor of love for us. And now we're 3 years into this project and super excited about, where we've come from and where we're headed.
Well, and I think the commitment to excellence is very clear once you taste the product. Also, just like the simple details of the bottle, the label, I think everything is so well put together. But, it's easy to talk a lot of game about terroir and blah, 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 because every gin, wants to be terroir driven. But you guys have done something pretty out there. I mean, most gin distilleries look at the potential of fermenting their own base spirit and say, oh no, way too expensive. Why would we ever do that? The stuff the big guys are giving us 10 times as good, because all we want is a neutral thing. And I think certainly there's an argument to be made for that, especially on a very, very small scale where you have, the resources are minute often and the ability to scale up even harder. So tell us about why this is so different from every other gin and what you guys have done there in terms of production. Then hopefully we'll get to walk through and see a little bit of what you got going there.
Oh, of course. Thank you. It was amazing to me. My roommate, again, from college, and I did some diligence tours. And, one of the beautiful things about this industry is that if you say, hey, I'm really interested in this, I'm thinking about doing this with as a business, as a career, distillers will, unlike corporate lawyers, they will actually pull you behind the curtain and say, hey man, yeah, let me give you a couple of tips. It's a really beautiful industry in that way. People are very helpful, and that's wonderful unto itself and uplifting unto itself. Almost to a person, those distillers pulled us behind that curtain and they said, I bet you're thinking about being grain to glass, right? And we would kind of nod innocently and they'd say, don't be fucking stupid. Excuse me. And, we had to go back and have a fairly sober look in the mirror and say, what are we trying to do here? I don't think that, I please don't understand this to be casting aspersions to the other method, but it was clear to us we had one chance at this and to be grain to glass all the way. We wanted to control that product from the ground all the way to the table, which is, where that phrase comes from. There are a bunch of reasons for that. I think the substrate that you choose, right, is critical. We went to ADI's convention out in Portland 3 years ago, 8 a.m, Monday morning. This is a gin tutorial for people that want to get into the gin business. They bring out 5 different little samplers, right? And they say, we'll be back in 20 minutes, judge them all out. And you judge them all out across a variety of categories. And then they come back and they say, guess what? Exact same recipe, 5 different fermentation substrates. And your grades go all across the board. And what they're trying to drive home the point, that fermentation substrate, despite the designation of neutral, despite all the chemistry, it actually does affect the
Experience.
Flavor, the nose, and very importantly, the mouthfeel of that spirit. And We tried tons of local corn. We tried tons of local products. We even tried sweet potatoes, which Panola County, which is right next door to us, is the most prolific county by volume in the country for sweet potatoes. But a rice farmer down in the Mississippi Delta, about 55 miles away, heard about us and dropped off some beautiful culinary rice, 5 different strains. But the jasmine rice was it created this just gorgeous distillate.
Mm.
And as you think of when you cook with jasmine rice, that extremely clean but also natural aromatics, and then from a standpoint chemically, a nice high sugar content, right, which is ultimately how we're going to create those yields.
Right, right. Although using rice brings in a whole nother aspect, in terms of the traditional way of accessing those sugars. I guess I imagine you use enzymatic breakdown of some kind, but are you using a live koji, or is it more like how does that? I mean, I guess we'll see inside, but how does that process work of actually, similar to what we do with, bourbon? You have your malt that breaks down, the enzymes break down the starches, and that sugars, which allow the yeast to create alcohol. Similar thing. I mean, there's a long tradition of fermenting and distilling rice, just not in this country. So it's a whole nother world. So it's an interesting way to go down. Can you tell us a little bit about that fermentation step and how you get there?
Of course. David, we were very aware that choosing rice was going to be a challenge unto itself, because almost no one in the world, not only in this country but in the world, was making gin out of rice. The fermentation of rice has been used in Asian cooking traditions for a long, long time, but that doesn't mean it's easy to get at that knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. We essentially had to teach ourselves a modified sake beer making technique. As you know, a lot of sake preparations take 20, 30, 40 days. We weren't necessarily looking for the complexity and balance of those beautiful sake making traditions, because what we were ultimately trying to get was the yield. Mm-hmm. But you look at the chemical nature of rice, right? It's those long carbohydrate chains, not readily consumable by yeast. As you said, we've got to accelerate that enzymatic breakdown, right? Mm-hmm. Expose those starches, simple sugars, so that the yeast can do their job and create what we ultimately need to create. We do that with 2 things. We do cultivate our own koji in-house here at Wonderbird. So we steam and clean 120 pounds of our jasmine rice once a week in our mash cooker, which I'll show you guys. Lay it out on our harvest table here, and then inoculate it with some koji mold spores that we import from Japan. Propagate that in a koji cabinet that we got from a sake maker in Nashville. Very, very prescribed climactic and temperature conditions to accelerate that propagation. And then we'll turn it over a few times. 52 hours into that colonization process, right, we'll pull it and drop it in a deep freeze. And the amylases in that koji, right, accelerate the enzymatic breakdown of the carbohydrate chains in the rice that we're seeking to ultimate yield on.
Are you using any of the other traditional techniques for increased yield in sake? Like I know they, add like lactic acid or other things, which is typical. No.
The only other thing that we do, other than the introduction of our house-made koji, is we taught ourselves into a very, very complex heating methodology. So we're bringing that mash up to some different temperature plateaus for very prescribed periods that is accelerating that enzymatic.
We lost you. Oh, there we're back. Something which is weird with the connection. Anyhow, this wouldn't be so dissimilar from whiskey production in terms of doing different boils and breaking down sugars that way. So that's.
I think we felt we are trying to do everything here as pure a way as possible, but you know, those heating methodologies are in the grand tradition, so of course.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, and then you know, after you've done all that work, you've only just started. I guess you have to distill it and then put all these wonderful botanicals in and a whole nother side of the gin. Why don't
we look at it almost as though our recipe development for the base spirit, right, was just the first recipe, and then the next recipe was the infusion of these 10 chosen botanicals. So there's really 2 recipes involved here.
Right, and as we said, because the base spirit is so important to the ultimate flavor, you can't really start that second recipe until you've finished the first one. I think that's pretty interesting. So tell us about what the botanicals are.
One more thing on that, David, because it sounds like you really know what you're talking about. I do want to make one very important point. As we taught ourselves how to do this, bringing that base spirit to neutral, 95% alcohol by volume, the technical definition of that neutral, we pull back from that threshold very slightly when we array our still, and one of my partners will talk you through that in a second. We've got 20 watch windows there, 20 plates, 20 phases. We pull back just a little bit in the way we array the still to pull that base spirit at about 93.5% alcohol by volume in order to retain some minor elements of that jasmine rice and that koji that we work so hard to manipulate into creating our base alcohol. And I do believe it changes the flavor. I do believe it changes the nose, but I do think very importantly it changes the mouthfeel, the viscosity of that spirit. That's just a production note that you might enjoy as a fan of this science, which is what it is. But maybe where you were headed was, why don't we go onto the production floor now and understand a little bit more about how we do this face to face?
Well, I think it's interesting to appreciate that notion. So, I mean, in terms of like Scotch production, the difference between neutral grain and a grain spirit is just a few percentage points off the still.
Exactly.
And so it's a real production. It's a real choice to do that, because you're retaining the spirit becomes an element in the gin rather than just being a medium.
You put your finger exactly on it, but it is a very important note for us. It was one of the major decision points we made in our production process.
Cool.
Yeah. Let me, if I can, David, one of my close friends and one of my business partners and one of our master distillers here is Thomas Alexander. I would like him to walk you guys through maybe 5 to 7 minutes on some of the details of our production process.
Yeah, please do. Hello, Thomas. Thank you for being here.
Hey, hello. Thank you guys for being here. I listened in on a lot of the discussion that you all have had heretofore, and really excited about the level of detail to which you guys understand what we're doing here with the fermentation process, and I'll walk you through in as much detail as I can give you.
I get dirty with it. Let's do it.
Yeah, cool. So we'll start with the fermentation. Really, I'm going to hand this phone to Rob so that I can illustrate with my hands.
Maybe want to flip it around. That's sometimes better if you swap the.
He's got it. Rob's, you got it, right?
There we go. That looks great.
How's that?
Yeah, we can. That looks lovely on our end. I mean,
can you see Thomas?
No. I see a door.
You're filming behind you now.
I see what you mean. Got it.
Okay. So essentially, the way we start our fermentation raw materials coming in the door here, that would be the jasmine rice that Rob spoke of, which is a proprietary strain of jasmine rice that is grown by a local farm here. They're a second generation family-owned farm. They have about 5,000 acres. They do high-end culinary rice only, so you're not going to see them in your kind of Uncle Ben table rice type of scenario, but they do some really extraordinary things with some extraordinary practices that make them very progressive in how they use their resources and what they're producing. So a lot of the really nice culinary culture that you have here in Oxford that Rob alluded to earlier, the restaurants and so forth here are almost exclusively using rice from these guys that we buy from. We use a jasmine rice. We bring that in. The first thing that we need to do when we're using rice to break down the sugars into fermentable sugars, rice comes in the door as starches. So there's our door that Rob is showing you. Here are our bins that we store the rice in to keep the vermin out, keep it dry, keep the humidity constant. What we need to do, though, first and foremost, to turn that into alcohol is to turn those complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, which are in turn water soluble and fermentable. The way we do that is by first creating an enzyme to introduce into a solution with the rice that will provide a catalyst to break down those complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. That specific enzyme is called an amylase, and that is koji, which is the kind of traditional Japanese sake making methodology for doing this, is to introduce this mold called koji. We make it in-house ourselves. We use a incubator cabinet, which is essentially an array of trays that allows for air to flow through so that we can control humidity and temperature throughout the process. But basically what we're doing is trying to grow a mold on a portion of the rice that goes into each mash. That is then introduced into this device behind Rob here, which is our mash tune, which is basically like any beer maker in the world would use to create their beer mash. Mm-hmm. We're going to introduce our bulk of rice along with a bit of rice that has the koji mold that we've grown on it as well. We've done calculations to figure out how much we need to convert X amount of sugar into X amount of simple sugar. Mm-hmm. We'll then spur that process along, I guess, with introduction of heat, water, of course, to bring that into the medium where yeast can do what it does, which is to metabolize those simple sugars that have been brought into the solution and turn those into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So in essence, we'll put everything into this kettle here. We'll bring it to our designated temperature thresholds. Once we've gotten the sugars pulled into solution so that they can be fermented, we'll then cool the entire mash down using this device here, which is a wort chiller. Mm-hmm. It's a simple device, which is really just a smaller tube within a larger tube. The larger tube has cooling liquid that flows through it. The inner tube has the hot liquid that comes out of this mash cooker here. So within a couple hours, we can have it down to room temperature, which is where we can then propagate it with yeast. And the yeast will have a perfect environment for it to do what it does best, which is to consume those sugars and turn those into alcohol and carbon dioxide. That cooled down solution of yeast and mash goes into these large square fermenters here, which are equipped with airlocks and so forth to allow the carbon dioxide to release, but not allow wild yeasts in. So we try to, really control the quality at every step.
Should we show my mash?
We do have a mash going. Actually, this one is, that one may be newer, but I'm not sure if it's going to be terribly active right now. But we do have a what looks to be a porridge in there, and if you look at it carefully, you can see little bubbles of carbon dioxide coming up, which is an indication that alcohol is being made. After about 10 days inside of that fermentation tank, we're ready to basically pull the alcohol out of that and go into phase 2 of our process, which is the distillation process.
So this is all with the husks, the kernel, and you're just
That's a good question. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So the answer is our grower, when they deliver the rice to us, they have milled the rice, so
okay.
it's not fully husked, but it's not polished to the point that you might imagine if you're thinking about a traditional sake maker.
Right.
So there is some husk material there. Mm-hmm. And yes, we do make certain accommodations for the fact that there is still some husk material there. In some of the enzymatic activity that happens, one of the stops that we make at a temperature threshold inside of our mash tun is specifically there to break down the
Cool. Oh, did we lose you? Okay. Very interesting.
You got us.
Yeah, you're here.
Okay.
So once we've kind of gone through about roughly 10 days, we're typically looking at a liquid slurry of solids and liquids that is around 12 or 13% alcohol by volume.
So that's coming from over here to our still.
So if you think about fermented liquids in general, that's a pretty high yield that we're getting.
Yeah.
We're going to pump that liquids, solids, and all into this kettle here, which is a 150-gallon still kettle. And what we have here, I don't know if Rob can pan back so you can see all of it, but it's a hybrid pot column still. So it can kind of behave in two different ways. It can behave as a traditional pot still, or it can behave as a more kind of advanced, what's called column still, which provides multiple cycles, distillation cycles throughout the process of the liquid coming from what it goes into the kettle as to the time it comes out of the parrot as. And I'll give a little bit more explanation as we go on with that if you want to hear it. But the first part of the distillation phase that we do is called the stripping run. And what we do in that stripping run is we'll pump all of that liquids and solids that Rob just showed you out of the fermenter, pump that into here. We will configure this series of valves on this still so that what we're doing is creating a single distillation cycle. And what I mean by distillation cycle is kind of important. A distillation cycle is literally where we take something that has alcohol in it, in our context, okay, in a liquid format, and we're going to heat it up to where that thing that we want to distill, which is the alcohol, we're going to heat it up until that alcohol becomes gaseous, liquid to gas, and then we're going to run it through the condenser to turn it back into liquid. So that cycle of the alcohol going from liquid to gas and back to liquid, that's called a distillation cycle.
Right.
In this first run, we're simply doing a single cycle. We want to heat what's in here to the point that we can essentially separate all the alcohol out from that slurry, that porridge that you saw in the fermentation tank. We want to separate that alcohol out. And we want to collect it in a purer, more concentrated form that we can work with and really start to refine and distill. So what happens after that first run is it comes from about a 13%, 12 to 13% alcoholic solution. After one run, one cycle, comes out at about 45% alcohol by volume. And at that point, it's a clear liquid. You can kind of think of it as a unrefined rice whiskey. And then once we've collected enough of that, what we call low wines, once we've collected enough of those low wines to fill this with low wines, we'll clean the still out. We'll reconfigure the still to run in the other mode that I spoke of that it can operate in, which is to say it'll operate in a column still mode.
Mm-hmm.
The way that works is we'll fill that with that low wine, which is now 45% alcohol by volume, a clear liquid that goes in there. So a lot more alcohol now. And we'll start heating that up. And we'll run it through each of these different phases, which I don't know if you can see it very well from the video, but each of these phases that I refer to are places where you can see a watch glass in the columns.
Yeah.
There's a little watch glass in there.
Essentially what goes on inside of each of those phases is another cycle happens. And it's pretty magical kind of the way these were designed. But in essence, what happens is that the heated alcohol vapor, as it comes from the kettle and progresses through this series of columns, it will become more and more refined by virtue of the fact that in each one of these little phases, what happens is this. The vapor is forced into a phase through a hole in the bottom of the phase that's only a small hole, like maybe 2 inches wide, and it's forced up into a section of the column where a piece of metal, a copper piece of metal called a bubble plate, is situated above the hole. So what happens is that hot vapor of alcohol comes in just beneath that, hits this cooling metal, which is this copper metal, causes that vapor to form from a gas back into liquid droplets until those liquid droplets form big enough droplets that they collect on the floor of that particular phase.
They kind of cascade down those teeth.
They cascade down the teeth of that bubble plate. Yep, that bubble plate. And then as the heat progresses enough through the system, the heat will build up enough so that that pooled liquid at the bottom of that particular phase will re-vaporize and go on to the next phase, at which point it pushes up through the next hole, hits the next cooling surface, condenses, recollects until the heat begins to build to the point that it can re-vaporize. And that cycle, that reflux cycle, continues and on and on and on until we've done 20, if you look at our entire thing, 20 distillations. And that's why we can take this low wines, which come in at 45% alcohol by volume, and we can take it out at the end after a single run at neutral, or in our case, as I think Rob mentioned to you, we decided to take ours off slightly less than neutral. Because we like the fact that it leaves a bit of the aromatic character and the floral character of that jasmine rice, as well as the mouthfeel of it. When we bring it off at 93% versus 95%, which is legally the neutral threshold designation. When we're making gin, we're not bound, like vodka is, for example, to going all the way to neutral as the definition of our product. We have the luxury of being able to play with that a little bit. And in our case, and frankly, I don't think any other gin kind of leeway that we have and do what we think makes a better product, which is to say we bring it back to about 93%.
So after you have that base spirit, where is the infusion of the the gin botanical is being done?
So let's do. You want
Great question.
Here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna turn this over to Rob again.
In order to make the base spirit, or as we say to other folks, just to make it a little easier to understand, the canvas, right, upon which we start painting those gin notes with which we're all familiar. Tom will show you here, this still was fabricated for us in Mobile, Alabama to be a gin still. And if you see on the third column there, there's a manhole at the top. That's a gin basket. We can open that up. It's a mesh basket. We can introduce dried botanicals in there, run the infusion through as Tom described, and those vapors, those alcoholic vapors, will take on characteristics of what's ever in that third basket. However, when we started doing it, we realized that the expression of those things was coming out far too murky, was not what we were looking for. We were always shooting for the stars as far as, like I said from the beginning. And so what we ended up doing, if Tom will join me over here, is we ended up buying 3 different stills for ourselves, a 26-gallon, an 8-gallon. There's a 26-gallon over there. You want to show
Yeah, I'll show you all. This is the 26-gallon.
an 8-gallon and a 3-gallon. We have 10 different botanicals in our botanical mix, but for the biggest couple, we use this 26-gallon still. Same principle applies. Still kettle here. This is the basket here. In the case of juniper, in the case of coriander, in the case of a couple of our other major ingredients, we will fill this with those dry botanicals. Same principle, 173, 174 degrees. That alcoholic vapor starts to come up through the mechanism, and it will be imbued by the flavor of the dry botanical that's in this basket. We will then, this is a condenser column here. You can feel cold water here. It will cause that vapor to condense. And then, look, that's juniper right there. No question about it. Over here, you'll see what we have done here is we've created a situation where we do all 10 of our botanicals individually. It's extremely unusual to make that decision. It is, in our case, because we have 10 botanicals, 10 times more work. What we're left with are what we call fractions that we keep in these old factories. Every fraction, which is probably rosemary, to our largest fraction, which might be juniper, Meyer lemon, black telecherry peppercorn, etc., etc. And then, crucially, using the floor scale that Tom will show you in a second, we blend them after the fact out to 4 decimal places just to maintain perfect precision. And those 10 distillates come together to form our gin. I think that, we get much more precision out of, much more expression out of each of our 10 chosen botanicals than we would otherwise. It's just like cooking. I tell people the onions are going to take longer than the carrots, are going to take longer than the cabbage. You have to babysit each to get the perfect expression of each. I think that makes perfect intuitive sense. But then I do think blending them after the fact leads to a much more complex spirit that will tend to reveal itself in layers. Cool. And reveal itself in stages.
Can you tell me, you're never introducing any botanicals directly into the spirit, though. It's only through the basket and the small still.
It's complete. This is vapor infusion, 100% vapor infusion.
All dry vapor distilled.
So no fresh ingredients, which would
No compounding, no macerating even. It's 100%.
One of our 10 ingredients, David, is fresh Meyer lemons that we fly in from Temecula in Southern California. We receive those and peel those and distill those the day we receive them. They are fresh. They are not dried. Almost every, a lot of peels you're going to experience in the gin world are going to be dried, leading to a jammier note. These are fresh Meyers. So when you say no fresh things, yes, we have fresh things. It's just that we dry vapor that distill them. In other words, they're not soaked in the liquid.
I got it. Got it. Cool. Well, now I'm thirsty. I want to taste some gin. So it's called day drinking for a reason.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's get to the fun part.
Come on. Did you guys do a custom bottle for this? It's a cool bottle.
This is new to America from a stall out of Barcelona.
It's a pretty bottle.
Thank you. That punt is very unusual, no?
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you. Did you see the back print we put on there? It's really speaking to the fact that the three of us took these major left turns in our lives. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings while the dawn is still dark. What are you going to make, David? We're going to make, I think we've got a couple things to make first, but you're going to just have it neat to start?
I'm just going to drink it. Tell us what's in here precisely in terms of botanicals.
Sure, Tom, you got that?
Okay, so, well, we thought we would keep this simple. We have a couple of backup options if this is not something that fits the bill for you guys.
Oh, he's having it neat to start. He said, just tell us what's in there.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to make a cocktail. I'm just drinking it.
Oh, so neat. You want the botanical bill, you mean? Is that right, Rob?
That's what Yep.
Okay, so good question. We should have probably covered this earlier. The botanical bill, we have 10 botanicals. Obviously, the predominant one is juniper. We use an Italian juniper. From there, I'll go with the more kind of conventional ones that make up a classic London dry style gin. So aside from the juniper, we have the coriander, angelica root. We have a citrus note, which Rob already pointed out is the Meyer lemon.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the four that make up what I think is a fairly classic London dry style gin recipe. From there, we go a little bit more obscure. And our remaining 6 are black telecherry peppercorn, which come from India. We have bay leaf, lemongrass. We have rosemary. And then the final 2 come from our property here that we operate on. Those are red clover, which as far as I know, we're the only gin in the world that uses a red clover. And we also use a pine needle, which comes from a southern pine trees that grow right here on our property. And so we take the needle with pine needles.
Yeah, the pine is such an unusual. I'm trying to put now I kind of get that pine thing that's distinct, I think, from the juniper slightly. Interesting stuff. What are you going to make today?
Well, so what we thought we'd make, if you guys are up for this, would be a classic Gibson type of martini to start with.
Great.
And we can branch out from there, but the Gibson is a lot just like a classic martini recipe. And we happen to have the luxury here of using some beautiful pickled onions that our third business has put together. He's a gourmand. So what we'll do is put together a concoction into a large stirring vessel of about 2.5 to 3 ounces of the gin, the number 61 Wonderbird Gin. For each cocktail that you're making, you'll want to put about 1/2 to 3/4 ounce of dry vermouth. And again, you vary this on how you all like it. We're going to today use a Spanish white vermouth that we love called Lustal. If you have that, we recommend it. It pairs really well without it.
Excellent.
Yeah, so, and then essentially we'll just stir that into a glass, and we'll put it into a martini glass, and we'll obviously garnish that with a pickled onion. And
That's like a fine afternoon.
Bob's your uncle.
We'll see where that takes.
Well,
Pepper me with any questions you have on that.
Yeah, David, that's a lot of information. Any follow-up questions on that process?
it's pretty well explained, I'd say. I applaud you. Having not tasted this in several weeks, now knowing a little bit more about the process, I'm understanding the flavors better. Certainly, there is that ricey note, which I noticed, of course, when we talked about it. It's subtle. Obviously, it's floral, but I'm kind of getting that subtle sort of nod to like a sochu sort of thing without being so obtuse and to say this is definitely a rice distillate.
Yep.
And the aromatics are extremely, it's not a bang you up, in your face style. I think it's a sort of gin you can kind of throw at anybody and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's definitely gin, but it's not like super in your face juniper. I think you've done a good job of balancing it. And now knowing that you're doing this blend after the fact, fractional gin making, or as you term it, that kind of makes sense. You're able to really tune those flavors and keep it balanced.
Exactly. When you have it, David, what are the cocktails that immediately spring to mind for our clients, our customers?
Well, I love the idea of the Gibson because you're sort of highlighting some of the savoriness of the spirit itself.
Yeah.
I think similarly, this would be fun in a citrus for the exact opposite reason. In just simple citrus gin drinks, Ricky's, things like that.
Yep.
Where you're highlighting the spirit because it is sort of a unique thing. And I bet this, because of the complexity of that spirit with water, I actually haven't unfortunately played with it too much in the cocktail, but I bet with water, you're opening those aromatics pretty significantly because you have that richer spirit, that oily texture. Usually that means you're going to have some fun playing with the cocktails there. So I can see it. I wouldn't mind it either.
One other place that we found success is sort of in the French 75-ish direction. Some bubbles can really work well with this.
Yeah, I believe that. I see you've got chartreuse there. I mean, I'm a last word type of guy, so
nice.
I could drink those all day long. That looks gorgeous. Great work there.
We would please come visit us sometime. We'll, as I said, there's some great restaurants here, and it'd be worth your while.
Aware of the culinary chops of Oxford, Mississippi, but I've now got another reason to come visit you because the only thing I like to do better than drinking is eating. So,
Memphis is just right up the road, etc. Let's do this, man.
I've been to Memphis. That's a fun city. Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
Drink it on Thursday.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Such an interesting product. We really hope you guys are well, and we're going to keep pushing this out here. Looking forward to visiting you out in Mississippi. We got a couple people. Anybody got questions for the distiller here before we say goodbye? I like to give people a chance.
Of course. Take your time. We've got things to do.
We've got 2 or 3 backup cocktails to sit through questions if we need to.
You guys are ready, huh? I wish I could. I have to you're finishing your day. I still have a bunch of work to do here. I get one sneaky drink after lunch, and then I'm back to
Hey, that's good enough.
right.
But hey, we would love to come see you guys in LA sometime.
Yeah, one day that'll be a thing again.
I mean, one day we'll be able to get on an airplane and not feel weird about it.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, our stores are still closed out here. I'm not taking appointments. This is about as close as I get. It's pretty nuts out here. Although it's getting better. They finally opened restaurants starting tomorrow. I might go to a restaurant tomorrow. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I think you should. And if you don't mind my asking, do you have any ideas on where that might be? I mean, I loved eating in LA.
There is a little place in just outside of downtown in like a historic Filipino town called Thunderbolt.
Nice. Run
by some homies. They have one of the best cocktail programs. They share a kitchen with one of the better barbecue places in LA, which is it's traditional barbecue with like a Filipino fusion sort of vibe to it, but they're not like trying to reinvent the wheel. It's Park's finest barbecue. It's exceptional. Which is closed since the beginning of the pandemic. They only do food for frontline workers. Right. Which is cool because they're able to do that, but you can't get the barbecue now. So it is what it is. But yeah, Thunderbolt, I think it's a Thunderbolt night. So we're very excited about that. And I'm grateful for your time, Robert, for explaining your wonderful products. And we'll look forward to seeing you out here. And I'll, definitely come to Oxford if you'll have me. That sounds fun.
No, it would be a huge pleasure. Do you have 2 more minutes just while you're here?
We do. Yeah. What's up?
I wanted to tell you, man. So Tom and I, got bored over the summer. And one late July afternoon, we said, while it was extremely hot and, things were a little unpleasant on a few different levels of society, we said, let's go and see if we can strip 3 of these granddaddy magnolia trees around town, and their blooms were at the absolute height. And we all know what magnolia blooms at their height, which only last for maybe 2 weeks, smell like.
We may not always know.
But it's truly magnificent, and it's truly it's unforgettable if one has experienced it. But anyway, we went to Ole Miss at 6 a.m. with scissors before the campus police would arrest us. And we came back with about 20 pounds of these things, and we distilled them. And we kept the distillate for about 3 months, and it was gorgeous. And then over the fall, we recipe developed, and we just came out with this 2 weeks ago. Cool. 800 bottles will only be made. We stripped a lot of the more esoteric elements from our gin. This is juniper, coriander, angelica, cinchona.
Okay.
Right, and magnolia.
Which is what the quinine.
I'm sure David knows.
Tonic comes from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got a sweetness and umami thing. It's got a little bit of spice. And then this magnificent magnolia. And we're only going to do 800 bottles. It just came out. But please keep your eye out for that. It's been a huge, huge deal for us over the last 3 weeks. People are really responding well.
Well, yeah, let me add it. Come on. Send me the pricing. I'll send you an order. Let's go.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Will do. But this is a beauty, and I wanted you to know about it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. We're happy to support it, and very excited to taste it. The proof is 90. Chuck asks 90 proof.
Well, the proof on 61 is 90. This magnolia is up at 54, I believe.
Nice.
Yeah, that's right. It's at 96 proof.
Oh, okay.
For the magnolia one, but
just a little bit of more of a puncher.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun. Awesome.
But anyway, hey guys, it is such an honor. I mean, truly, it's an honor. I lived there for 5 years. Your story is just it's like an
icon.
It's like a bibliothèque of fucking. We just don't get that stuff here, and we esteem what you guys are doing so much. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you here or there, wherever. And let's get that Magnolia on the shelf. Very excited.
Beautiful.
Cheers, guys.
Love y'all.
Bye-bye.